When we look at the history of Western art and important Western artists, we want to get a little background. The ancient Greek and Roman artists who were influenced by the Greeks had a philosophy called humanism that emphasized the positive aspects of human beings. The Greeks found beauty in the human body and the human mind, and they thought that human beings were capable of great things, almost the equivalent of the gods and goddesses. The Greek sculptures of gods and goddesses looked like people and vice versa. And this Greek art was very realistic and based on close observation of the human body and the natural world. When we get to the medieval period, roughly 400 to 1400 AD, when medieval Christianity has taken hold, there's a very different, more pessimistic or negative view of human nature and the natural world. The medieval Christians believed that the body and the earth, the natural world, were full of sin and temptation and were corrupt, and that the human mind was also corrupt. And these artists focused on more abstract renderings of not of nature, but of spiritual subjects and divine figures. Michelangelo was an artist who is synonymous or known, connected with the Italian Renaissance, which means rebirth. And it's actually a rebirth of that Greek idea, the Greek humanism. Michelangelo Buonarroti was a sculptor, also a painter, and is perhaps the most famous artist, or at least Western artist, in the world. His most famous work is his statue of David. David was based on a Hebrew legend about a young boy who conquers a giant named Goliath. David conquered him, killed him with the slingshot. And there were other sculptures of David before Michelangelo's, but Michelangelo's was different in several regards. One, all the other sculptures focused on David after he had slain Goliath, whereas Michelangelo's focused on David before. So we see David standing here with his sling on his shoulder and a rock in his hand. But you can see that he's very much modeled after some of those Greek sculptures, the pose and the sense of confidence and the ability to conquer a great giant is all part of that humanistic view of nature, of human nature. The other big difference about David compared with other sculptures is that David is 18 feet tall, which is a little ironic because the story is about a young, small guy who beats this giant. But Michelangelo's David, the way he envisions him is sort of like a Greek god or someone who's imbued with the power of God, not a Greek god, but the Christian God or the Jewish God, Yahweh. And when we see David from this point of view, he looks very confident. He doesn't look concerned. He looks very proud and perhaps a little swaggering. But when you look up close at David's face, you see a little bit of worry, a little bit of doubt, a little bit of complexity there. So while his body and his pose exude confidence, his facial expression when seen from different angles exudes definitely focus, concentration, and perhaps even fear. And this combination of emotions, this complexity of human emotion, is one of the things that makes Michelangelo such a great sculptor, to be able to convey these complex emotions, which are all part of the Renaissance, and this convey the complex emotions of this person through a stone carving is really remarkable. And if you get a chance to see David in Florence, you definitely want to make that trip. Another Italian Renaissance artist who may also be as famous or maybe more famous than Michelangelo is Leonardo da Vinci. He was an artist, but that wasn't really in his own mind the top of his accomplishments. He's what we call a Renaissance person, which means someone who knows a lot about many different areas. Before there was science, he studied the human body and studied natural phenomena. He was a musician, a composer, an inventor, a scholar, a writer, and mastered all these skills, which was part of the Renaissance ideal. Like the ancient Greek artists and like Michelangelo, Leonardo found beauty in the natural world, and he hoped to bring back some of those ideas of observation of nature, of studying the natural world, and he believed that the most praiseworthy form of painting is one that most resembles what it imitates. Leonardo helped develop drawing and painting techniques during the Renaissance, including chiaroscuro and perspective. Chiaroscuro literally means light dark, and it refers to the use of gradual changes in value, light and dark, to create the illusion of three-dimensional space, of light and shadow, and of volume on a two-dimensional surface. These drawings here are from some of my drawing students from a while back, using charcoal and light and dark to create the illusion of these forms with light and shadow on them. Mona Lisa is probably the most famous painting in the world by Leonardo da Vinci, painted around 1503. Michelangelo's David was made around 1501, so that's right in the middle of the Renaissance. Leonardo's painting Mona Lisa is a good example of chiaroscuro and this realistic painting style. Oil paint takes a long time to dry and it's very slippery, and it can be blended with these very subtle gradations from the lighter colors to the darker colors to suggest that there's a real person there, that you're looking almost through a window and viewing this young woman. The subject of the painting is not, we don't know exactly who she was. There are different theories, but she is a young woman who has plucked eyebrows and a shaved forehead to make her hairline higher, which were part of the Renaissance ideal of female beauty. The little cracks in the painting are not intentional. They were just a result of the way the painting aged over time. Mona Lisa is described as the best known or most visited, most written about, most sung about, most parodied work in the world of art. She is standing in a landscape background, and we get not only the sense that there's a real person there with three-dimensional shape and volume, but also that there's a landscape that kind of dissolves into the background, and we can see deep into the space, which is part of that realistic painting style. Moving into the modern period, we're going to be talking about Claude Monet, who is associated with the Impressionist movement in art. And this movement in Impressionist painting went away from the very finely blended, subtle changes in light and value and color that we found in the Renaissance. And his style of painting was all about painting outdoors and capturing the sensations of light and the changing effects of light as they enter your eye. And some people say the subject of his paintings was light itself, and he created the illusion of light through the medium of color. He's most famous for paintings of his water lily garden, which he built and established over the years once he became a successful painter in France. He was known to paint the same subject at different times of days and on different days, to capture the different effects of light. So here we have 4 different versions of paintings of his Japanese bridge overlooking his water lily garden in Giverny. More paintings of his water lilies. When we stand back and look at these paintings, they look realistic. We can tell what they are, but if you move in closely, you see lots of very loose, open brushwork, not blended, just layers of brushwork applied one on top of the other in very thick dabs of paint. His paintings became almost abstract in his later years, where he just focused on water and the reflections of the colors and leaves and sky in the water. Another artist from the modern period is Georgia O'Keeffe. She's an American artist best known for paintings of close-up views of flowers. She was kind of a revolutionary artist and person, and she's also known as the mother of American modernism. These close-up views of flowers are so focused on the color and the forms that they almost lose their identity as flowers. And her paintings are associated with representations of female genitalia, the vagina. She is, for this reason and the fact that she led a very independent and kind of courageous life as a pioneering woman artist, she's become a hero and icon for many feminist artists and thinkers. She became very successful with her paintings, but left a promising career in New York City to move to what was then a remote part of the American Southwest in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and lived there the rest of her life. She lived a long life. I think she was 98 or 99, and again had a very adventurous and unconventional lifestyle for an artist and for an American woman at that time. I've been absolutely terrified every moment of my life, and I've never let it keep me from doing a single thing I wanted to do. Great quote there from Georgia O'Keeffe with one of her other paintings that's not flowers. It's kind of a surreal image of a ladder floating in the sky. The next artist and final artist we want to look at today is Jacob Lawrence. He was an African-American artist that was part of the Harlem Renaissance, which was a group of artists, writers, and intellectuals, African-American artists, writers, and thinkers who created a great amount of important art in the early part of the 20th century. He's most famous for a series of paintings called The Great Migration, which is based on the migration of African-American former slaves and their families from the South, where things were very dangerous and difficult, into more eastern and northern cities in the United States. This migration took place over many years and was the greatest movement of a group of people in the history of the United States. His style was based on European modernism, not so much realism, but he used bold colors and shapes to convey the emotional image, the emotional impact of the lives that were led by the struggles and difficulties and pain of African Americans at this time. The painting on the left of the woman washing clothes is a great example of almost abstraction, where you can see the motion of the figure, you can understand the difficulty of the action, but it all becomes a very interesting and colorful pattern. The one on the bottom right is an example of the fact that in the South, African American children were not allowed to go to school, so they had African American people created their own schools and taught their children how to read and write. Or examples of paintings from Jacob Lawrence's Migration series.